Somebody's asking, how long will prejudice blind the visions of men? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment,
yes, sir,
however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed to earth will rise again.
yes, sir,
How long? Not long.
yes, sir,
Because no lie can live forever.
yes, sir,
How long? Not long.
How long?
Because you shall reap what you sow.
yes, sir,
How long? Not long.
how long?
Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that scaffold sways the future.
Yes.
Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
Yes, sir.
How long? Not long.
Not long.
Because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Yes, sir.
He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored.
Yes, sir.
He's loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword.
Yes, sir.
His truth is marching on.
Yes, sir.
He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah.
Hub family, welcome into another special edition of The Hub, All Things for Us, with your boy, Damon Reynolds. And listen, this is a special edition of episode 16 of The Hub. I'm so excited because this is a commemorative day for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this is a day, of course, where we reflect, but not only reflect, we partake in different acts of service around the country to carry on his legacy. And man, that speech is so powerful. I know he has hundreds of speeches out there, but that question still lingers in my mind where he says, how long must we wait for the wheels of justice to fully turn and for his vision and many of our visions and shared visions as a Black community to be realized? And to be honest, I would say, 50 to 60 plus years later, we're still asking those very same questions. And although we've had perceived freedoms, today also marks the day, and I'm intentionally saying this afterwards because today also marks the day where a man enters the presidential office who has really stood against everything that Dr. King would have wanted for this country, whether that's in policy, whether that's in the type of leadership, whether that's in the type of model of what it meant to be a part of humanity. But not only that, just this idea of this being a country that says we are one nation under God. Could we really say that we are one nation under God with a lot of the issues and challenges that we still face, not only as people of African descent in this country, but also just the power structure and the way that people are treated, humanity is treated on this side of heaven. So family, today is a day to reflect, but also remember that this is a day to be active. And since this is my platform, I don't want to just make this, and I'm going to be honest in saying this, family, I want to get vulnerable. I don't say this to offend anybody, but somehow, some way, this day tends to get whitewashed. And somehow we only remember Dr. King for his speeches. I Have a Dream speech. I don't know if y'all remember as a kid, but we watched the movie Martin. And I remember in elementary school how that movie had such a profound impact, because when you would see it, it kind of romanticized some things in a way. But I do remember, of course, it showing that other side too. But America has a tendency to whitewash the story down. And I was listening to his son speak about him earlier on the Roland Martin, Unfiltered show. And his son was just saying how it's so funny how he remembers his father being hated by most people, by not only the system, the government, those folks the white folks who didn't want to see his vision prevail, but also there were people inside, our own folks, who really had some issues with Dr. King. So let's not let this day make us shy away from the real work that needs to be done, but also truly remembering his legacy and the things that happened. And so, family, I want to take the time to educate a little bit on my platform, and I don't want to make this a boring scenario, but I have a book that I read pretty constantly, and if there are any Black men who watch this platform, it's a book called New Visions for Black Men. There's also two versions. There's an older one, and then there's the New Visions, and it's written by Dr. Naeem Akbar, and he is a Black psychologist, and of course has contributed some great just work to that field. But in this book, in this New Vision for Black Men, he highlights the various men that we as people of African descent should strive to emulate. And he lists Dr. King in this book, and it was one of the best breakdowns that I got to see, because he said that one of the greatest things that we could do and take from Dr. King was his courage. And I want to just read an excerpt from the book because I think it's important. And one of the things he brought up is that Dr. King, of course, had tremendous courage. And he writes this sentence: "One cannot be a man without courage. It isn't simply the bravery that permitted him to confront the cruel and atrocious cops and their vicious dogs of Birmingham beating down unarmed women and children. It was the courage that gave him the daily power to confront the possibility of death at the hands of those who had no respect for his life or the lives of Black people. Courage, therefore, was the character trait that fueled such bravery. And his belief in his mission and the power of his conviction is the courage that makes a man of unquestionable excellence." And so, family, as we embark on Dr. King's legacy, let us not forget the courage he displayed. Let us not forget the courage that it took to speak up during a time where it was very unpopular, and dare I say, it could have, and it did, cost him his life. Family, let us not put ourselves above the mission. Let us remember that on days like these, when we see Donald Trump now back in office and we are hearing echoes of things to come, let us remember the type of courage that Dr. King had in the midst of chaos, in the midst of white supremacy, in the midst of the government raining down, trying to kill him, in the midst of all those different things. And family, the one thing that I love about Dr. King that I think we struggle with during this day is we've assimilated into American society. Self-preservation has become way more important than what it means to fight and uplift our people. And that's been a tragic thing to look at, because we do everything it takes to look out for ourselves and our families, and that's great. And I'm not saying everybody needs to go out and be jumping up and down in the street protesting, whatever it is. If you're not called to do that, and you have to know it, because it is a calling. But I believe all of us in some capacity, no matter who it is, know right from wrong. And ideas for us is to speak against injustice. So I'm going to also continue to exercise a little bit of platform privilege, as I call it. And I want to continue to read about another part that was put in this book that I believe is profound about Dr. King. It's presented this way. Dr. King then presents us a graphic example of a man of courage and the power that courage has to transform a social movement. He confronted his people's historical enemies of slave masters and white supremacists, and then confronted the weak and passive fear that had been internalized by his peers and colleagues. It took courage to confront the enemy within the enemy without, and this is an example why this quality is such an important one in defining manhood. Men stand up with the courage of their conviction to fight the enemies of himself and his people. Courage means that you are willing to be different and ask hard questions and confront vicious enemies. Courage gives you the power to be extraordinary rather than ordinary, and to leave the boys doing boyish things when you take on the challenges of manly building. Courage equips a man to be unusual, exceptional, and to stand up when everyone else is sitting quietly down. It took courage for Dr. King to take his Boston theological education out of the classroom and into the streets. His training had prepared him to conduct the business of church and theology in a building, but courage propelled him to take the church into the streets to confront the enemies of his people. Courage empowered him to imitate the image of Jesus by confronting injustice in this world at that time. The eloquent stories of Jesus never depicted him as having a palatable place of comfort to meditate on high ideals. So family, I know that was a long excerpt, but I want this day to be about work. And so without further ado, I know this has been a long monologue. I know this has been a long moment of me talking, but today I actually chose to do something a little bit different. I went and researched what was happening around my area, around my community during this time of year. And I'm not discrediting or diminishing what other folks are doing, but usually MLK Day of Service will consist of maybe doing some community project, whether it's something to make the community better. And somehow, in some ways, we've denigrated this day and we've diminished it in some ways to planting flowers in a garden. We've diminished this to maybe creating certain murals, and those things are all fine and great, but there's real work that needs to be done. And so family, I took the time today and I spent my time with the University of Richmond. And they were holding an event that was, it's community conversations. It was centered around MLK, but really it was a conversation of how to move things forward, making politics digestible to the masses. And so we talked about and we shared our stories. I got to be in a group that welcomed me enough to share my story and also what I believe we should be moving towards and how do we move forward in this conversation around fighting against injustice, systemic racism, but also just injustices in society as a whole. And so family, without further ado, I want you guys to take a journey with me to the University of Richmond. And I thank those folks who not only sat down with me, who took the time to talk with me in the circle, but no matter what, even if we disagree, even if we don't share completely the same ideals, it was enough that we were able to be in a room together where we could foster an environment that helps us talk over things about how to move forward. But more importantly, it was done in love. See y'all soon.
So for me, it's a day to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but also a day to get to do community service and get involved in the areas you live in, find people, and serve them in ways that are needed, but for them and for yourself as well. I think it's important.
And obviously, you know, this day kind of takes on a whole new meaning. We got the presidential inauguration. Just considering knowing what's going on in DC, you know, what has that kind of brought up for you as well?
Yeah. I think it's just reinvigorated me a lot more. I've been telling friends that I want to make sure I'm more involved this time around. I think the last time this happened, I was more like, you know, closed off of it and just kind of, I've been hearing this word, like a lot of people are in a situation of despair, you know, feeling a little disconnected. So I think as a way to combat that, MLK Day is a great way to sort of get into it and serve your community as much as you can. Continue to do that throughout the year.
That's good. And obviously, I mean, you came out today, and a lot of folks, when they think MLK Day, they think doing a day of service, some community service project. I think that's fine, but obviously we participated in a conversation that makes you not only reflect, but just consider ways that we should move forward in this conversation around fighting injustice. So something you took away that you'll carry with you today, or something that you'll continue to reflect on, what is that?
Oh man, there was a lot of things. This conversation was amazing because there were just so many different generations of people that were here. So one lady came up talking about just growing up in with racial divides, growing up and how her experience is a lot more different than a lot of course, like the white, her white counterparts. But I think the one thing that stuck out was the importance of listening to one another, even if we think someone from a different race may not fully, of course, understand what you may have experienced or you may have experienced. But but being willing to share that, and then when you're in a situation where you're having to have sort of those hard conversations about race, being prepared. So like having some bullet points, like how do I approach people? What sort of things should I say? Should I not say? Both with people that you know and people that you don't know, so that you're not kind of like going into those situations blind as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it. I would say, any particular thing about Martin Luther King that you'll think about that stands out? That's the last question I have. Anything about him? A memory? What was the first time you got exposed to Dr. King?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So I'm actually a Nigerian American, so that experience is kind of like, I wouldn't say like altered, but brought for me like a different perspective when it comes to just racial justice and things like that. So yeah, my first experience, I would say, was probably just like middle school or something, when they're teaching you. But just being able to serve in school and on campus, that has been for me one of the biggest things in ways that I'm able to, I feel like, honor him.
Just your title alone, I'm curious, as somebody who walks in the clergy seat, who's a reverend, what does Dr. King mean to you?
Well, after you mentioned that, I just had a thought. It's really empowering to have somebody that lived during your early childhood and you were inquisitive about, as a role model for justice, for all the things that really affirms your humanity, supports your security, gives you vision for living the best life. And ironically, it was at a time that, very much like now, things are changing. And the people who were in my community, my parents, my family, the people who lived long before my existence had prepared for me to come on the scene. And so Dr. King, being a person of the cloth, we are a religious people coming from Africa, that forms the crucible of my life experience. I've always liked sacred spaces. Being a Pisces, I love spiritual stuff.
Yes.
And his life was so deep, so rich, everything else. And so when I began, I guess, asking questions like every teenager does about life and about what's going on in Richmond and some of the dichotomies that I began to see around me. My mother, who had three children, and for which I'm the oldest, wanted the community, embraced the community, to be the community, to share their wisdom with me. So I was fortunate to have neighbors that introduced me at a very early age, not only in the church, my family did that, but the community at large. And the NAACP Youth Council was the very first experience. And it gave me a sense of knowing the playbook of my time. And when I said the playbook, it meant that people needed to have an education, not only be spiritual, but be earthly good. And that's what justice means to me, being earthly good.
Earthly good.
Having a purpose. And in a time where I think that we have individualized ourselves, having that relationship, everyone will say, have a blessed day, whatever. They recognize the sanctity of God. They recognize the meaning that God has in their life. Some do. But back in the day, just about everybody did. And So when I come to this hour or this day, it's like a pause. It's not a day off. It's a day very much in service. It's a very much a pause when I say it's a time to reflect. It's a time to listen to other people's points of views. It's a time to become enlightened. It's a time to rejoice in humanity at this hour. After the election, I said, okay, what do we do now? And today, experience of meeting with people of diverse backgrounds, of intergenerational conversations, having different experiences expressed so openly. Some you shared and some were completely different from yours. But it strengthened my resolve to use the rest of my life to doing much, in a smaller sense, what Dr. Martin Luther King was all about. And so I'm just glad to have been living at a time that not only was it Dr. Martin Luther King in Richmond, Virginia, it was Mayors Kinney, Mayors Wilder, Mayors Marsh. It was people like Claudette McDaniel Black in the South Side. It was persons that were standing out in various governmental capacities that were role models. Persons like Chuck Richardson in the West End. People who have given quite a bit. I think about the churches, Fifth Baptist Church, Roscoe Cooper, Dwight Jones, and at the Second Baptist Church, very much involved in social justice. And I see in various ways we are doing the same thing now, maybe in a different way. So in a time that is, it appears to be at a low part of our history, there's a playbook, and nothing is new under the sun. One person wisely told me once when I was about in my 20s, and I was leaving Pennsylvania, of all places, going back home, and she said, just remember, you're young now, and you got a lot of living to do. And just remember, every 50 years, things change. Just be about the better change. And then I thought about what my mother used to say, don't worry about what people do against you. There are always going to be some against and some for you. You just be prepared for your time. And so when I see the times turning around and all, then it becomes very apparent for me to be about carrying on the playbook for our time.
Thank you. And I was going to say, I know the saying, that's so heavenly minded, no earthly good.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's the yes, you mentioned about the clergy. I used to think that all people that were involved in the church dressed up, wore black and white, of neither which I like to wear it. But there comes a time when God is in your life that the things that God brings you through only to bring you to what it is that you're supposed to be doing. And people might not understand it because people might see you, oh, you have a beautiful voice, why aren't you a singer? And I say, I sing to myself. That's not my call. But I know even with every year that goes by, the call to ministry of some sort, like Dr. Martin Luther King was, is something I want to emulate. And it almost tells me that you are to do this, and you are not to do this in such a way you're looking for vain glory. Whenever you serve God, all people are lifted up. And if that's in your heart, then you're going to be successful. And so that's the ministry. Everybody came here with a soul that one day we have to meet our Maker. And I believe that the fullness of life is when you can meet the Maker and have said, well, the Maker says to you, well done, servant.
Yes.